In a dusty frontier town, the small wooden church stood packed to its rafters. 10 women in simple white dresses, some borrowed, some hastily sewn, stood in a solemn line before the altar. Each held a plain wedding band, their faces etched with a mix of desperation and hope. Malachi Brooks, a weathered rancher in his finest dark coat, stood tall and still, his hands clasped behind his back. The preacher, a veteran of 30 years, gripped his worn Bible, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool morning air. He had officiated hundreds of weddings, but never anything like this. Outside, townsfolk pressed against the church windows, their whispers a blend of prayers and curses. Something unprecedented was unfolding, and the tension was palpable. Ruby Callahan, a former schoolteacher with striking green eyes, stepped forward first. Her gaze met Malachi's, carrying gratitude and confusion that tightened his chest. Before yesterday's chaos, she had been a quiet woman, her voice barely above a whisper. Now, she spoke the brief vows required by law, binding herself to a man she barely knew. One by one, the other 9 women followed, each ceremony stark, lasting mere minutes, with no rings exchanged, only the legal minimum. The preacher's voice grew hoarse, his eyes darting to the church doors as if expecting interruption. Outside, horses snorted restlessly, and men in expensive suits paced, their faces dark with fury. They had come for a purpose, and Malachi was unraveling their plans with every vow spoken. Inside, the congregation held its breath. Children peered from behind their mothers' skirts, sensing the weight of the moment. Older men fidgeted with their hats, recalling times when survival demanded desperate acts. Chester Briggs, Malachi's loyal ranch foreman of 15 years, stood by the back door, his hand near his gun belt, watching the crowd with sharp eyes. He trusted Malachi implicitly, yet even he couldn't fully grasp his boss's decision. By the 7th ceremony, the preacher's hands trembled visibly, by the 9th, he paused twice to wipe sweat from his palms. The church felt smaller, the air heavy with the gravity of 10 marriages in a single morning. The youngest woman, barely 18, wept as she spoke her vows, glancing back at the others for strength. They nodded, strangers bound by shared desperation. When the final ceremony ended, Malachi turned to face the congregation, his expression unreadable. The townsfolk knew this was no ordinary wedding day, it was the start of something that would reshape their town forever. But why were those men outside so angry? What had Malachi saved these women from? Before anyone could speak, the church doors burst open. Virgil Granger stormed in, his polished boots echoing on the wooden floor. His red face and quivering beard betrayed his rage. 6 men in fine suits followed, outsiders in this frontier town. "This is illegal," Virgil shouted, jabbing a finger at the preacher. "These women belong to the creditors until their debts are paid." Malachi stepped protectively in front of the women, his voice calm but edged with steel. "These ladies are legally married now. Territorial law says married women can't be sold for debts not their own." Ruby's eyes widened as realization dawned. The other women exchanged glances, piecing together the truth. They had been hours away from being auctioned like livestock to men who would take them to unthinkable fates. Virgil's hand twitched toward his coat, but Chester's deliberate cough from the back stopped him cold, his hand inching closer to his holster. The congregation watched, breathless. Malachi produced a thick roll of papers from his vest and handed them to the preacher, who unfolded them with shaking hands. "Marriage certificates," Malachi declared. "Witnessed, signed, and filed with the territorial clerk 2 hours ago." The crowd murmured. How had he managed this before the ceremonies? Virgil snatched the papers, his face twisting from anger to confusion. "Impossible. You filed these before meeting them. How did you know their names?" Malachi's jaw tightened. Ruby's gaze sharpened with suspicion. If he knew about the auction and prepared the certificates, what else did he know? Before he could answer, hoofbeats thundered outside. Marshal Wade Harper dismounted, his silver badge glinting, flanked by 2 deputies. The townsfolk parted as he entered the church, his eyes scanning the scene, 10 brides, 1 groom, a furious creditor, and a tense congregation. Ruby stepped forward, her voice clear. "Mr. Brooks, you knew this was coming." "How?" Malachi met her gaze, his words heavy. "Because I was supposed to bid on you, to keep you from the others. Someone who knew what kind of men would be at that auction asked me to protect you." Virgil sneered, so, Brooks planned to buy himself wives and played hero instead. Malachi shook his head. "No. I was tasked to shield them from predators like you." Marshal Harper's eyes narrowed, holding the certificates. "These look legal. No irregularities here." Virgil's voice rose. "These women owe substantial debts. They were to be auctioned at noon." Before Harper could respond, a woman galloped up to the church, bursting through the doors. Her riding dress was torn, her graying hair wild. "Malachi, they know you filed the certificates," she gasped. "They're coming." Margaret Tate's arrival shifted the room's tension. Virgil froze at her mention of a ledger. Ruby demanded, "What ledger?" Malachi's voice was grim. "Your debts aren't real. They were fabricated to make you disappear." The church erupted in gasps. Margaret, trembling, confessed, "I kept their books." These women were targeted because they saw something or knew someone dangerous to powerful men. Ruby's mind raced. She recalled glimpsing men exchanging documents at the Riverside Hotel months ago. The pieces clicked, they weren't random victims but threats to a hidden scheme. Hoofbeats grew louder outside. Judge Cornelius Blackwood, a silver-haired man of chilling authority, dismounted and entered alone. His pale eyes catalogued the women like property. "Marshal Harper, restore order to this farce," he commanded. Harper stood firm. "The marriages are legal." Blackwood's smile was cold. "These women are fugitives with warrants for fraud. The marriages are void." Ruby's voice cut through. "You're lying. You created fake warrants and debts. I saw your men at the hotel, trading documents." Blackwood's gaze chilled her, but she pressed on. "What did we see that scares you?" Margaret, tears streaming, added, "They were selling people, women, children, orphans." The youngest bride gasped, "My brother disappeared from the orphanage. I saw him in those photographs." Blackwood's composure faltered. "Misunderstandings by simple minds." But Malachi stepped forward, producing not a ledger but a federal marshal's badge. "Federal Marshal Malachi Brooks," he declared. "I've been undercover, investigating your trafficking ring for 8 months." The church fell silent. Blackwood's men hesitated as federal marshals surrounded the building outside. Margaret revealed, "I gave Malachi your ledgers 3 weeks ago. The government has everything." Blackwood's face twisted. "I have connections in Washington." Malachi countered, "They're already arrested. This spans 3 territories." The youngest woman demanded, "Where's my brother?" Malachi softened. "Safe, with 43 others, in federal care." Blackwood reached for his gun, but Harper was faster. "You're under arrest for trafficking, fraud, and corruption." Federal marshals stormed in, disarming Blackwood's men. The judge was led away in chains, his empire crumbling. Ruby spoke for the women. "What happens to us now?" "These marriages were for protection, not real." Malachi nodded. "They're legal, but your choice. Annulments are ready." 9 women took the papers, eager to reclaim their lives. Ruby hesitated, her green eyes meeting Malachi's. "Who asked you to protect us?" she asked. "Your sister, Sarah," he replied. "She escaped Blackwood's operation and gave us your names." Ruby's heart leaped. "Sarah's alive?" Malachi nodded. "In Denver, ready to testify." Ruby declined the annulment. "I want to join you, Marshal. Help stop this in California." 6 months later, Marshal Malachi and Deputy Ruby Brooks rode west, a true partnership forged from an impossible day. Behind them, rescued children thrived, and a small church held 10 certificates as proof that desperate measures could yield hope.